Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. They made the big mistake of letting an Army person be in charge, so I take accountability for any miscues out of the gate. Accountability, something we have not heard much of from the White House lately. So I'm honored to be here with fellow colleagues, all of whom at various phases of their lives and careers have worn the uniform in service to our nation, put their life on the line, not for party or themselves, but for country. And this is a watershed moment, we believe, in our country where we need to speak up, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as patriots, and say it is absolutely unacceptable that sensitive security information, operational information that would put American lives of our constituents in harm's way. And you're going to hear from all of us today several common themes. One, accountability. All of us knew this serving in uniform. You're responsible for everything your organization does and fails to do. At a minimum, we're calling on our Republican colleagues to share in that joint call for accountability, that there needs to be a fulsome and transparent investigation into what happened with the leakage of the information that we know about and potentially much more sensitive national security information out there. And then the second piece is we're continuing to call on the House Armed Services Committee through their oversight means to hold a hearing on this. And if that is not answered, we'll continue to escalate on behalf of our constituents, on behalf of the American people, to have that transparency and to have that accountability. So again, I want to thank all my colleagues for being here, and I'm going to hand it to Congressman Mike Thompson next. Sir, thank you.
Pat, thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our colleagues who are here today. I'm Mike Thompson from California's 4th Congressional District. I served in the United States Army with the 173rd Airborne Brigade and did a tour of duty in Vietnam, and I spent 8 years on the House Intel Committee. And I'm here today with my colleagues because we're dealing with a gang that can't shoot straight. This is an incredibly serious unforced error that they made, and their error put American service members' lives in danger, and that is not something that we're going to tolerate. We learned very early, every one of us in our careers, that loose lips sink ships, and this is a textbook perfect example of that. The idea that you would go on an unsecured platform to talk about a military invasion is just absolutely mind-boggling. Nobody in their adult, good, sober judgment would do that. And this is a huge problem. One of the people on that venue was in Moscow when this information was being talked about. In Moscow. And to suggest that this isn't dangerous is absolutely beyond me. It was dangerous, it was reckless, it was an unforced error, and we need to come together to figure out what happened, why it happened, what else is going on. This isn't the only time that this has happened. I'm pretty sure of that. We need to make sure what else is going on, and we need our Republican colleagues to stand with us to bring about a transparent and a clear and thorough investigation. And it's my honor to introduce Ted Lieu, fellow Californian, a former colonel in the United States Air Force.
Thank you, Mike. I want to thank Pat Ryan and Mike Thompson for organizing this really important press conference. What Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth did was outrageous. He sent secret war plans to a journalist, and the reason that is so reckless is if anyone other than people who should have had that information got it, you could put pilots at risk. If a foreign intelligence service somehow was monitoring that group chat, they could have given it to Houthis, and the Houthis could have shot down a pilot. It's really, really disturbing that the White House still does not seem to understand the seriousness of this problem. Even today, they're saying somehow that this information was not classified. They are just lying. All of us here, serving a uniform, we know that that would have been classified. You cannot talk about the time, date, place, targets, sequence of strikes, and not have that be classified because, again, you're putting American troops' lives at risk. And I also want people to understand that it's not just that the Signal app was not authorized. The Pentagon sent an email, according to public reporting, on March 18th saying do not use this. It's that you've got software out there, one of them is known as Pegasus, that simply takes over and controls your phone. So you don't even have to break into the Signal app. You simply become the user and you can simply monitor everything that is happening. So if Foreign Intelligence Service was doing that, this, again, was very reckless and endangered our national security. And that's why we're calling for an investigation to get to the bottom of this, and we're asking for accountability. And with that, my honor to introduce the great member from New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill.
Thanks, Ted. Hi, I'm Mikey Sherrill. I'm a former Navy helicopter pilot and a former Russian policy officer. And I have to tell you, I remember as only a teenager when I entered into the Navy getting my first security brief and understanding how important security is to our military. As we've all heard for years, loose lips sink ships. And now we have at the top echelons of our government people who don't seem to understand the need for any national security. We even, as you heard, had a report that someone was in Moscow. Having traveled myself to Moscow, I know the type of operational security that is expected there of military members. I know the briefings that I received. And so to think that now we have a government that is has so little concern for our security is really, I think, infuriating. And to see all of these members here who have served, who know that their lives have been on the line and know that what the minimum that they should be able to count on is that their own government is not going to sell them out to foreign adversaries, that their own government is going to take their security seriously. And yes, to think that anybody is saying now that this was not secure information or this was not secret information or classified information, anybody who knows anything about this area, and there are people on that signal chain that know better, know that this is classified information. You don't give targeting information. You don't give timing. You put people in danger. People's lives, American lives, were in danger because of that signal chain. The thought that you would be in Moscow and that nobody would be monitoring your text chains or that nobody would have access to that is really ludicrous at this day and age. I don't think anybody buys that either. So to think now that this is going to go uninvestigated or that Armed Services is not going to hold a hearing on this in the House is really, I think, completely disregarding what just happened, the danger of the situation, and the sense that I think we all have that if this has been reported on, we need to know what else is going on because somebody's got to clean house at the White House. And it's obviously not going to be the president who is now up to his old trick, so I'm declassifying it. Well, too late, buddy, right? Like, this was classified information. This put lives in danger. An investigation needs to take place. That is what we are calling for. And I think the House Armed Services Committee needs to hold hearings on this and get to the bottom of it so no more service members are put in danger. So I am really glad to be here today. And with that, I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Salud Carbajal, to speak next. Thank you.
Thank you, Mikey. What else can be said? Recklessness at its best. I served in the United States Marine Corps Reserve for the most of my service. I was mobilized for Desert Storm. I went to North Carolina, didn't make it out to the theater. But I speak for all the service members that were put at risk here. This was reckless at best and an illegal violation of the Espionage Records Acts. That's what transpired here. And as we see typically with this administration, they deny. First, they denied. Secretary of Defense denied when that was asked by the media. Then they went to saying that it was not classified. They unknowingly put somebody who was not part of the national security team on their signal channel. That's what they did. And then knowingly, they did this on a signal channel that was not a secure method of communication. This is recklessness, and we need to hold the administration accountable. They put our service members at risk. Could you imagine the enemies or others that they were targeting knowing all our plans? We could have dead pilots today. We could have dead pilots today and so many others that could have been injured or killed because of their reckless behavior. This is amateur hour. And the Senate confirmed this cabal of incompetent buffoons. Let's call it what it is. So today, I think I'm glad to join my fellow veterans, calling for accountability, calling for the cleaning of the White House, and taking action to make sure that this ridiculous behavior doesn't happen again. With that, I will introduce Congressman Derek Tran. Chris DeLuzio.
I said,
Whoa.
here. We're going to get the Marine out of the way.
You know what?
He's still learning.
They wrote it in crayon. That's why.
No offense to Derek. We're going to get up Congressman Chris DeLuzio from
Thanks.
Pennsylvania.
It's all right, Salute. Thanks. It's an honor to join these great colleagues of mine, all of us who wore the uniform in different ways in different times. I was a naval officer. I served at sea and on the ground in Iraq. What we saw from this administration was reckless. It was a dangerous breach of our national security. It was probably criminal conduct. There has to be consequences. This included the Vice President of the United States, the Director of the CIA, the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor, the Secretary of State. I could go on and on. These are some of the most powerful people in America. And if any of us had done this as junior enlisted or junior officers, what do you think would have happened? You'd be court-martialed. You'd likely end up in Fort Leavenworth or something like it. And to these people, to think that they may not face consequences is outrageous. It cannot happen. Now, we know Secretary Hegseth's own Pentagon warned just last week that there were hacking vulnerabilities to Signal, the very platform they were communicating on. Communicating about, you heard it here, sensitive, classified material. There is no defense for this. And so what we are all saying here is something obvious. There has to be accountability. There needs to be a full investigation. And again, there are likely violations of the Espionage Act. There are likely violations of record-keeping requirements. They were communicating in a platform that purposefully deletes their communications. That is a violation of federal law. They are obscuring and hiding records from the American people. They were putting at risk the service members who were carrying out these strikes. Now, I said heads should roll. There have to be people who lose their jobs over this. There has to be a full investigation. I serve on the Armed Services Committee and join in the calls that there is a full public accounting for what happened here. And when we uncover exactly who committed wrongdoing, if those folks don't resign, we should remove them from office. There can be no defense for this. They put our national security at risk. It's our duty in Congress to make sure that oversight happens. And I know these members and I will do everything we can to make sure it happens. So with that, I'm honored to introduce a fellow Pennsylvanian and veteran, Congresswoman Houlihan, excuse me. Sorry, Chrissy.
No worries. And thank you very much. And thank you very much for organizing this and this opportunity to reiterate what has already been said. When I was a little girl, when I was 10 years old, I lived in Annandale, Virginia. My dad was the Navy person responsible to Secretary of Defense Brown. Under his bed, my father's bed, was a red phone. And I was instructed as a 10-year-old, never, ever, under any circumstances, do I touch or pick up that phone. Because that was the way that they were able to communicate back in 1970, whatever, to make sure that they could have conversations, active conversations. Fast forward to the 80s when I was an active duty lieutenant myself and spent the bulk of my career in a skiff, having learned all of the different ways that you manage classified information and don't manage classified information. If I had done this as a junior officer, I would have absolutely marched myself into my colonel's office and resigned on the spot. In addition, I would have expected to be sent to jail. So Pete Hegseth, Mike Waltz, Marco Rubio, listen to this list. Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, and every other Trump administration official who uses Signal for war planning and mission execution has to be held to account for their stunning incompetence and their intentional clear defiance. So that's what we are all doing here today. We want to make sure that the hearing is called. We expect, frankly, that no hearing will be called, and so that we will have to at some point escalate this. But for either this group of Cavalier officials does not grasp the danger that they have put our nation in. If they don't grasp that, they just don't care. So either way, whether they care or don't care, know or don't understand, this is a colossal screw up, and they need to be accountable for that. So the issue for the administration is not to address, we talked about some red herrings, how a reporter got added to a Signal chat. That's a complete red herring. Although the gaslighting currently underway from the president and the National Security Council and themselves that's what they're trying to fool you with. I can tell you exactly what happened. We all use Signal. Accidentally, Mike White typed in somebody's name and he got added to the chat. And the rest is, as they say, history. And it's history because we now have the receipts. We can now, thanks to the Atlantic's reporter, have the magic of screenshots. And so if we're being told that there is nothing to see here and that none of this is classified and that no information was shared on an unsecured or unapproved communication platform that was classified, then that's just fine. Then show us the money. Show us the receipts. Don't edit it. Don't redact it. Don't disappear it. Release it, and release it right now. But we know they won't do that either. They're lying about what happened because it was reckless, because it was probably illegal. They're covering for themselves and for others. They're gaslighting us here in the Congress, you here in the audience, everybody back home. The same people who have spent months and in some cases years pursuing leaks of classified information and promised forms of legal retribution are now tightening their own ranks and closing their own ranks. So who gets hurt when that happens? We've talked about it a little bit. Men and women in uniform get hurt and possibly die. And the fact that nobody did die apparently right now is just an accident of chance and luck. So we, the American people, and us, the members of Congress, we owe ourselves a level of accountability, and we call for an investigation now. It is my privilege to introduce a fellow colleague, also from the Armed Services and Intel Committee as well, Representative Jason Crow of Colorado.
Good afternoon. I'm Jason Crow from Colorado, and it is my pleasure to be here with my colleagues, my comrades and brothers and sisters in arms that represents almost 100 years of military service standing behind me here today. We all understand that our deepest and most sacred obligation is to protect the men and women in uniform who protect us every single day. There's nothing more serious that we do day in and day out here to ensure that these men and women are protected and that they can go home to their families when their mission is done. And it's that makes this incident, this reckless breach of security, so staggering, right? Because it not only put at great risk the lives of those airmen and women who were conducting an extremely dangerous mission that day, but it also represents a larger pattern. And I'd like to talk about that. See, this isn't a one-off event. This isn't just a singular mistake that the administration still hasn't admitted that it needs to fix. This is part of a larger pattern of disregard, of impunity, of not taking its job seriously in our most sensitive national security life and death decisions. Whether it's transmitting the names of intelligence officers in an unclassified channel to the White House, whether it's Elon Musk's private employees hooking up a personal computer to a sensitive national security system, compromising that system, whether it's giving Elon Musk and his employees access to private, personal, financial, and data of American people. This happens over and over and over again. So the pattern that has brought to light through this incident shows very clearly that this administration simply does not care about protecting your data, protecting your information. It simply does not care to take seriously enough protecting sensitive national security information. Now, we hope that there was no damage done here. And we don't know that to be true because we still have to do the investigation. But folks, it is simply a matter of time before the culture of recklessness and impunity of the Trump administration is going to get a lot of people hurt very badly. And that will only be stopped if there's a change in culture. And the only way you change culture is by getting information, bringing it to light, and then imposing accountability on those responsible. That is what must happen. And if Donald Trump and the Trump administration do not do that, they are sending a very clear message once again that they do not care about the safety of the American people. Now, it's my honor to pass this over to another fellow combat veteran, Seth Moulton from Massachusetts.
Thanks, Jason.
Accountability is back. Accountability is back. I quote Secretary Pete Hegseth. That was our Secretary of Defense on the record just a couple of months ago. Now the debate among national security professionals is over whether the Secretary was just incompetent or whether he was drunk. That's how low this has gone, and those are serious debates happening among national security professionals today. Because my colleagues are right. This put American lives at risk. This cheapens the work that our men and women on the front lines of our armed services and our intelligence agencies do every single day. Because it says the rules that apply to you don't apply to us as your leaders. There's a simple concept that I would have thought Pete Hegseth would have learned in the National Guard, which is leadership by example. Well, let me tell you, if any guardsman at any level, including the most junior private, had done what Pete Hegseth did, he would not only be fired, would not only lose his security clearance, but he would probably be criminally prosecuted. Let's just debunk a few myths here, because now the approach these leaders are taking is to lie. That's not in the leadership manual for our armed services, but that's what they're doing now. They're saying, oh, this information wasn't classified. Without even knowing the full details, we know that the time of attack for this operation was in the message. Let's be clear. That's classified information. That's all you need to know. Let's address another issue. Was this illegal? It's illegal on two different levels. One, it's mishandling classified information. That's been well established. But the second level it's illegal on is that the executive is required to maintain records of its communications. And this is a way for this lawless administration to get around that. Third, was there a risk? Yes, there's tremendous risk. That's why national security professionals, including everyone on that group chat, aside from the people who weren't supposed to be on it, has 24/7 access to classified proper means of communication. So if the national security advisor feels like, oh, I need to chat with someone, well, guess what? In his home, in his office, on his plane, he has the means to do so within the law. So there is no excuse here. But there's also clearly no excuse accountability. And it's very clear that Secretary Hegseth, with how he is handling this, has no honor, has no sense of duty, and has absolutely zero accountability for his own actions. It's now my honor to yield to a fantastic freshman veteran, Congressman Vindman.
Well, thank you. We've heard some really passionate remarks today, and I want to look at this from perspective of a 25-year Army veteran, a JAG that's prosecuted cases, serious cases of violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice and felony type cases, and also investigated these types of breaches. And so operational security is a basic but critical function, and it's something that's taught to the very youngest of service members. And what we saw in this breach, in this leak, is those basic ideas thrown out, because there's a sense of callousness, of indifference, of of lack of accountability in this administration that is deeply disturbing. So anybody that has a family member that is in uniform, anybody that has a family member or is themselves serving in national security is now very concerned because they saw their senior leaders, 18 of the most senior people in the national security establishment, callously sharing information that I, as a member of the National Security Council staff, previously sat through a principals committee, literally the pinnacle of our national security establishment. I could only imagine that the data included things like the operational op plans for the attack. There is no chance in hell that this was not classified information. It's just not possible, certainly at the time that it was released. And so Signalgate is real, and we need to take appropriate measures to protect the American people and national security. And so the way you do that is you investigate. And it's incumbent on folks in the executive branch, in the White House, in every department or agency to understand the scope of this breach. It's standard procedure. Investigate to figure out what is the extent of the spillage, and then take measures to remediate that. Our job in Congress is to exercise an oversight role. We have to have a clear understanding of exactly what happened. Is this very unlikely the only PC that was held on Signal? No, I doubt it. Who exactly was on this? I mean, there are references to the VP, and I only say this tongue-in-cheek. VP, Vladimir Putin? No, we need to understand very well exactly who did what to understand the full scope of the breach and take appropriate measures. The messages were undoubtedly classified, and we need a full accounting. And the last thing I'll say is the president has previously released information that was in the classified realm to clear the air. He has the same opportunity to do that now. He can release exactly what was on the signal string so everybody, the American people, in an act of full transparency, can understand what's going on, and we could move on. In any other administration, this would have been considered like the type of controversy that was enough to bring down cabinet secretaries. In this one, it just seems like a random Monday. So we need to get rid of this air of lack of accountability and take appropriate steps. Thank you. And I have the
Another Marine.
I have the honor to introduce Herb Conway. Thank you.
Well, you've heard quite a lot, quite properly, about this very serious breach. The superlatives go on and on. The worst security breach that anyone has seen in our nation's warfighting history since, I don't know, for decades. We have an administration which plays fast and loose with the rules, disregards privacy of individuals, and now we find disregards the secrecy that should attend a warfighting action. It's the job of the Commander-in-Chief certainly to protect our nation, but it's also the job of the Commander-in-Chief to protect our warfighters when they are sent into action. The idea that this information should be shared on non-secure channels where foreign adversaries can access it, where they can understand how military operations might be conducted, and, as we have heard, no accountability, no explanation, but to pass it off as, well, it's just another thing, should anger every citizen of this country. It should anger our allies, who are now going to need to be concerned about what will happen to their information when it's passed along to the highest, the upper reaches of our administration and the national security structure. Now, this is very serious. If this had happened during the Biden administration, if this had happened during the Obama administration, we heard calls when Secretary Clinton had a private server that she should not only be prosecuted, certainly be investigated, she should put in jail. We heard this over and over again in prior campaigns. Now, this has happened at this time with this administration. If it was Biden, if it was Obama, we would be having hearings. Hearings would be scheduled before even all the facts were out, and they'd be calling for not only an investigation, they would be calling for resignations. We have heard and we understand from people who know, from news organizations who know, that if any person who was a contractor for DOD, any person who was in the military who had engaged in this kind of security breach, they'd be out the door the next day. We've heard that people recognizing they made a mistake would step forward and resign, but we don't have that moral authority, unfortunately, the people that are at the top of our military and defense structure. And so we are certainly calling for accountability, but in this gentleman's opinion, a true accountability will occur when the Secretary of Defense Hegseth resigns his office, as he should, just like any enlisted person or any other contractor for DOD would have to do, and National Security Advisor Waltz to do the same. They have committed very serious acts, and we've heard even possibly crimes. And we stand here calling for accountability. We must have it. The American people must demand it, and we must do all we can to ensure that accountability occurs. It's my honor and pleasure to bring forward, for the second time, Congressman Tran. All right.
Thank you. Resignation and investigation. I am so honored to stand shoulder to shoulder with my colleagues who have worn the uniform of our country. We know that making one mistake or ignoring one security requirement could put lives on the line. I wish the officials at the highest ranks of our national security establishment adhered to these standards. In fact, they should be held to much higher standards. They hold the ultimate responsibility of protecting American lives and the security of our nation and our allies. Instead, these Trump administration officials ignored every possible security measure, even some so basic that a high school student learned to follow. Vice President Vance, Secretary Hegseth, Secretary Rubio, National Security Advisor Waltz, and other high-ranking officials recklessly shared precise details about weapon packages, targets, and timing over a Signal group chat. This is not just a breach of protocol. This is a breach of national security. We know for sure that a journalist had access to the group chat. But what we don't know about still is who else had access. We need accountability. We need answers, not just who is responsible for these reckless actions, but what the Trump administration is going to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Resignations and investigations. Thank you. I'd like to invite up Congressman Gil Cisneros.
Thank you, Derek. Thanks, everyone, for being here today and giving us this opportunity to speak to you about how gravely this is. I'm Gil Cisneros. I represent California's 31st Congressional District. I'm a Navy veteran, but also I was the former Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, working in the Pentagon, understanding how the security of that system kind of works and how you communicate. And I can tell you this. When I was in the Pentagon, when I was the Undersecretary, never ever did we use Signal to plan anything, any meetings, coordinate any efforts, or give away definitely any details about operations that were currently going on. Anytime you talk with the Secretary, anything, right, is at a secret level. You have, as it's been already said, right, there are devices that you had. I had multiple devices in my office that we would secure on secure networks, right? And then you had your unsecured network. Any operations or anything that was going on was definitely over secure channels. And that was not happening in this. And the thing that is really bothering me about this is the fact, too, that, every office pretty much in the Pentagon is a SCIF. I mean, definitely the Secretary of Defense's office, but yet he's communicating on his personal cell phone. you're not supposed to be taking cell phones or Bluetooth or any of those devices into your skiff where they can be kind of tapped into and listened to and brought into that environment. There is just a complete disregard for OPSEC, for operation security by this administration. And then the audacity there is that the secretary had actually said before this too, right, that we're going to start getting down on OPSEC, that their OPSEC was tight, and they're looking into this. And he's actually talking about polygraphing, people there at the Pentagon to find out where the leaks are. Well, problem solved. Starts right there with the Secretary of Defense. He should be the first in line there. He's the one who is creating the problems. OPSEC's supposed to start with him. As it's been said too, loose lips sink ships. That was something that every seaman learns when they joined the Navy. It's right there at the beginning of boot camp. Nobody would have ever thought that it would start with the National Security Advisor as well as the Secretary of Defense are the ones who kind of letting out the information of where the details of this exercise were and how it was going. And so with that, thank you very much. And now I have the honor of introducing another former Navy colleague, Jimmy Panetta.
Hey, thanks, Gil. Thank you. Let me thank Congressman Thompson and Representative Ryan for putting this together. And of course, it is a very proud yet disappointing moment that I get to stand here with my veterans and have this type of discussion with all of you. I'll keep it short because I'm sure it's probably getting to repetition. Some of you already finished all of your stories. But the fact is that repetition is kind of what we know up here, especially if you've served in the United States military. That's how they teach you basic things. And I can tell you that one of the most basic things that they teach you from the minute you take that oath is Operation Security, OPSEC. And you get it drilled into your head. And every member of the armed services, from the lowest enlisted, and yes, you would hope, to the Secretary of Defense, would understand the importance of OPSEC. And you have to understand the importance of classified information and handling classified information, because the problem is that classified information and that getting out can lead to the loss of lives, And that is what happened here. This type of breach, this type of carelessness, this type of recklessness put men and women in uniform in jeopardy. I have a nephew that's serving on a ship in the Middle East right now. His life, I can tell you, was in jeopardy because of this. Mothers and fathers whose sons and daughters are serving over there at this moment should be very angry. They should be talking to their members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, about what we need to do to ensure that this never happens again. In regards to that, as you heard earlier, I too am dismayed at what would have happened if the shoe was on the other foot. If this was another administration and this happened. Where are our Republican colleagues? Where are our Republican colleagues who served in the military? Look, all of us up here will probably tell you we act in a very bipartisan manner. Of all times to be bipartisan, this is it, especially when it comes to this type of carelessness, especially when it comes to putting the lives of our military members in jeopardy. And so I'm here to basically say, to call out and to ensure that we hope that we can ensure not only oversight of this situation, but that this is a type of oversight that needs to be done by Republicans and Democrats, especially when it comes to the men and women in our armed services. And so I hope that's something we can continue to work on. If not, basically you're seeing who actually understands what it means to keep our nation secure and keep our men and women in uniform and keep their lives secure as well. Thank you. I'm the last one. Ryan, questions?
Anyone have any questions? Yes.
A few members alluded to actions you could take or ways you could escalate this particular issue. What options are available to House Democrats to force action on this security issue?
Excellent question. I think what you've heard from everybody here is we need to dig into this. We need to find out what the procedures are that they follow. How do we know this isn't happening in other places? How did this happen? It needs to be a full investigation. We need full transparency. And what we're doing is we're calling on everyone in Congress to come to the front line on this to make sure we get those answers.
I'll just very quickly add, I mean, if House Republicans don't do the right thing by our nation, our men and women in uniform, everybody that was here today, we're going to ensure that they do the right thing. We will, every single day, remind people of the grave national security violation, the risk to all of our men and women in uniform, and we will not let them try to sweep this under the rug. I know our leadership is behind that, entire party is behind that, and you can hold each of us accountable to continue to push on that, and we appreciate your all's help to continue to focus on this until the right thing is done.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to add one thing on that real quick. At some point, the Secretary of Defense is going to have to come and testify in front of the House Armed Services Committee. And if they think he's not going to get asked about this, they're not living in reality. He's going to have to answer the call at some point, so why not do it now?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. You all mentioned that you'll kind of escalate this if there isn't a House Armed Services investigation on this. Is there any chance that Democrats would do some sort of shadow hearing or shadow investigation on this topic to kind of get that information out?
Well, I think you heard it loud and clear that what we believe needs to happen is the Congress of the United States of America, in a bipartisan manner, needs to do this. But as you also heard, if they don't, we're not standing down. Yes.
The President a short time ago just said that on camera the information is not classified that he said was shared. Do you believe that the President is lying directly, and considering he wasn't on the call, and then following up, if the President said that the information shared was not classified, should the journalist who received the information be compelled now to share that information publicly? I mean, according to him, it's not classified, or without repercussions.
I may have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. There is no way in the world you can plan a military operation with airstrikes and have that not be classified to some level. It is absolutely absurd that they would think that anybody with any understanding of any of this would fall for that.
If I may, so I sat on Principals Committee meetings and dozens of meetings at the White House, and this is secret information. It's probably TS information. This is inbound aircraft timetables before American personnel are in harm's way over that over Yemen. So it's classified. There's no doubt about it. A private can tell you it's classified information.
Yes, one more.
Can you expand on what holding your colleagues to account looks like?
Well, I don't think there's any bounds to that. We're going to do whatever we can to ensure that American military personnel are safe and that our missions are protected, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that that happens.
If I may.
Yes.
But also, this is more than just members of Congress. I know we're up here talking about this. This is, like I said, the mothers and fathers whose sons and daughters whose lives are in jeopardy because of this breach. They need to hold their representatives accountable so that their representatives then basically actually have the courage to step up like we are up here and hold basically their Secretary of Defense and our military leaders accountable for this reckless breach.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.